Right, these are all the bits that you're going to need to do your nails. First of all, we've got a pretty coarse nail file. Now that is going to be used to do two things. You're going to be basically roughing up the top of your nail a bit with that, and also going to be using that to shape your nail once you've actually put the acrylic on. That's going to be pretty important because unless you put it on extraordinarily neatly, it's not going to be the right shape and it's going to be all bumpy and stuff, so you're going to need a really coarse nail file that's actually designed to take acrylic off. It's got two sides, a very coarse side and a slightly smoother side. Got a shaping block. Now this is good for actually getting the right curvature and just generally smoothing out the bumps, which are a little bit harder to do with a solid nail file. So this is actually a foam block and it's got yeah, coarse edges. You can get all kinds of different flavours and varieties of those, so yeah, just have a look around. Next we have, this is going to be really important as well, to apply the acrylic I actually use this brush. Now I've got quite a thin tip on the brush, but I know that lots of different people use different, even different shaped brush heads, so yes, very important, and that's a good quality brush, probably the most important part. Small little pen. Now this is actually like a felt tip pen. It's some kind of acid, I think, and it just takes all of the moisture off your nail and also just make sure there are no nasties under your nail, no bacteria that are going to fester under the acrylic. You can get wipes which you actually put on, but yeah, we're just going to be using this. Never had to replace this, they last for ages, they're pretty cheap. The actual acrylic powder itself, okay, this is a huge pot and this stuff lasts forever. You won't be able to really see it, but it's just a very, very fine powder, and that is there. Conveniently, the label has actually fallen off this, basically just dissolved off because this stuff is fairly potent. Open it up, it's kind of purple in colour. I actually recommend getting some kind of little bowl to pour it out into so you don't actually contaminate the whole pot. Now, all of this is great and you're going to need all this stuff, but you're also going to need some acetone. Acetone is really important for cleaning all of the acrylic off anything that happens to get on, so the brush for example. And when you want to take your nails off, and if you needed to replace them or if you needed to get it off for any reason, you're going to want some acetone because that actually dissolves all of the acrylic, and you just soak, again using some kind of dish, just soak your fingers in the dish and then you'll be able to wipe it off. Possibly most important of all will be some tissue paper, because this stuff tends to get everywhere. So just a little bit of tissue paper. If it goes wrong, you just wipe off your nail and then you can try it again. And also, probably good to have something underneath where you're working first time, because you're going to drop this stuff everywhere and it's basically like super glue. Once it sets, it's rock solid. So yeah, you're going to want some tissue to hand in case any of this stuff gets spilt as well, because it stinks. Okay, now the way that I do this, I actually have my natural nail, so that's actually got some length to it. I'm not having to rebuild that at all. Now some people have broken their nails off and you'll actually have to rebuild the tip of the nail. There are a couple of ways of doing that. I'm not going to look at that now, but there are plenty of videos on YouTube which explain how to do that. It's fairly straightforward, and you can just use a piece of paper underneath your nail and then just build out onto that. It's one way of doing it. It's not the best way, but there it is. So first thing I'm going to do is take the rough side of the nail and just rough up the top of my nail bed. Now, because I've done this before, the tops are fairly roughed up already, so I don't have to do it that much. What I will have to do is actually work into the corners a bit, because I found that if you don't get it right into the corner, along the edges just there, you actually don't get good adhesion there, so it will start to peel away after a week or two. And then I'm going to take the little acidy stick and just work over the nail, like so. Make sure you get into all the edges. This stuff smells quite strong, so yeah, I guess you should probably try not to inhale too much. It's not very pleasant anyway. And you just wait for that to dry off. So I'm going to take a little bit of the stuff, dipping it into the liquid here, dipping the tip of the brush, and I'll show this up a bit closer when I do it. I dip the tip of the brush into the powder, and then basically that will form a little ball on the tip of the brush, which you then work onto your nail. Now this is going to take quite a lot of practice, I imagine, because when I first started doing this, obviously having to use my left hand to paint onto my right hand, and that's just a little bit awkward to do. Now I watched a lot of people at nail salons do this for a while when I was getting my nails done in salons, and that really helped. It gave you a pretty good idea of what you were going for, and also gave you a good idea of how long you have to work, because remember, this stuff is going to set whilst you're working with it, so you do have to work relatively quickly, but maybe you can just wipe it off if it does go wrong. Formation of acrylic now, I'll show this up a little bit closer. Let's take the brush, dip it into the acrylic, not for too long, take it out, give it a little tap, and the excess comes off. Then we take the little ball that's been formed, and I'm going to place that onto the nail, and then gradually just slowly work that in. Oops, a little bit went on my finger there. Now you don't want to work it all the way into your cuticle, so you do want to actually have a bit of a gap at the back just there, so you just take that around like so. So you actually leave a little bit of space. Sometimes just use my nail just to peel that back a bit if any does get on there, just so that it can breathe. And also it's almost impossible to file it down once you get it that far back onto the cuticle, so you'll end up with quite a rough edge after a week. Dip the brush in a bit of the liquid, give it a wipe off just so that it doesn't set hard. I've already applied the stick just here onto the thumbnail, that's already done. Now I quite like getting quite a thick layer going on. So, taking the ball onto the thumb, just wet down your thumb a little bit so that gives it something to adhere to. A lot of people do it a little bit drier than me, but I find this actually gives me a much stronger bond. Probably because I'm not very good at doing it, but that's the way it works for me. Probably people from salons watching this and cringing. Now, this method of using the brush, that's my bit of tissue, is possibly the more difficult way of doing it if you're building your nail yourself. And I know that a lot of guitarists actually use a method where you dip your thumb into the liquid, so you put the nail in the liquid and then dip it in the powder, and then you let it set and dip it, set. That builds up in layers gradually, but from what I can gather, it's not the best way of doing it, and also it gets quite messy. Not that we're vain, but we do want it to look reasonably nice, and if you do this right, it will look basically natural, a little bit shiny and obviously thick, but it won't be all blobby and messy and stuff. Okay, now those two nails are done. Camera focuses in. Yeah, there we go. So you can see I've got a fairly thick tip there and a fairly thick tip on that one. Next is going to be shaping. So let's get this stuff away. You can see we barely used any powder, and this container will literally last for years as long as you keep it in a dry place and keep it safe and not spill it everywhere. Very fine stuff, don't breathe it, for goodness sake. So, this is going to take a little while to set completely, and it's probably almost set now, but you want to make sure that it's basically hard before you start to work it, so it would be best to leave it for maybe 10 minutes, and then it would be pretty much solid. I know in a salon they just kind of go with feel and wait for it, but if you're doing it at home you want it to set completely, because you might not have got your mixtures 100% right. So you can see there's a little bit just there, it's a bit rough. working the edges. Okay, now working over the top. Just make sure that's all smoothed down, get the sides a bit. Okay, and then I usually go to the slightly less coarse side just to smooth things down a bit. It'll start to look a little bit neater as well. By the time you've done one, the other one should be ready to go, so I'm just going to work my thumb quickly there. Right, at this point you might want to give your nails and your fingers a wipe because you're going to have dust everywhere. And then you're going to take it down to the buffing block. And again, just working with the contours of your nail here, it's just taking over the buffing block and trying to get any of the little ridges, bumps off. Yes. Okay, so this is slightly thicker than the normal nail. It's got a bit of a different texture to it. When I put it side by side with my natural nail, it doesn't really look that different. It's got a bit of white around the edge at the moment, but that'll come off when you wash your hands. Yeah, so that is how I do my nails. There they are. Now once you've done all of that, you're probably going to want to buff the nails. So this is a buffing block. You've got the coarse, which isn't as coarse as the first nail file we looked at, slightly smoother, and then the polishing edge. Now I'd use this for the tips and just work. You work underneath, work on top, and you work the side. And basically just looking for a smooth glass-like edge. And that just looks like that. And then you do the same thing on the next. Working, make sure you get all of the edges, especially ones that are going to be making any form of contact with the string, so you can get the top a little bit as well. Now you will actually dent these nails and take little bits off them, so it is quite important to do this regularly. And then the buffing edge, and again, just working around on top, underneath, and on the side. And that should give you a really smooth glass-like edge. You can see that kind of glinting there in the light, and that's probably going to sound a lot better than it would have done just raw. There we go. Smooth, glass-like, lovely nails.